Okay, we're recording now. Why did people come to the Americas? Not only, quote, in the beginning, 10 to 30,000 years ago, but then why did Europeans come and what kind of interactions did they have there? So push factors are kind of why people leave where they already are, right? What is pushing them out? And then pull factors is why do they go to a certain place? What attracts people to the Americas? What attracts people to Houston, right? And so some of the push-pull factors, say for Houston, although I love this city, people don't come here on vacation, right? People come here for jobs. That's what they come here for. They come here to make money. And so that would be a pull factor for Houston. A push factor would be the weather, right? Or hurricanes. People leave. Why do people leave that area? So when we're talking about the Americas, why did people come here and how did they come here? And we think there's two main ways in which they came. The first is that they walked during the last small ice age across the Bering Strait. So like where Alaska is was actually connected to Russia. It was all frozen over, so they were able to walk here. The other way we think they came is by boat, actually, through the Pacific Islands and from Southeast Asia. And that's relatively new because we found evidence of that in Latin America and America. But the reason people come, so why were they coming? What was pushing them away? What archaeologists and historians believe is that they were coming in search of food, that they followed the food here, especially if they're walking, for example. And most times when people leave their home and uproot themselves, it's to sustain a basic need, right? And when basic needs, we're talking about food, shelter, water, safety. And so this is probably, why we feel they came this way, that they were hunting the large mammals such as mammoths, etc. And so they followed the animals over here. But then they split up, right? And they, as centuries passed, they became different civilizations. In North America, you have many hundreds of different Indian tribes. And then as you move into Mesoamerica and South America, the same. You have lots and lots of different ones. Now, the probably most famous are going to be those that are in Mesoamerica, at least in the time period in the 15th century. So you're looking at the Mayas, the Aztecs, and then in South America, the Incas. Right, and so these are just three of the largest civilizations, but not by any means the only ones. Okay, and so they have come over and created quite large and elaborate civilizations, and something that Europeans don't really come to terms with for a very long time, for hundreds of years, is this superiority complex. Do you guys know what I mean by that? A superiority complex, thinking that your culture or your beliefs or even your race makes you superior to someone else. And the Europeans are very afflicted with this, at least in the 15th century, right? So when we see them interact with the Native Americans, whether that's North, South, Mesoamerica, they firmly and strongly believe that they are the civilized society and that they are there to bring civilization to quote unquote the savages, right? That's a very European view on that. But what they found was that the Native American cultures had very large civilizations already. They had just as much structure as the Europeans did. And in this, we're talking about the Aztecs, right? Specifically them. So before we get the interaction there, why do you think Europeans left Europe?
They wanted more territory or more?
They want more territory? Okay. Anything else?
They didn't like it in Europe.
The economy.
The weather was
the
better.
economy. The weather, conquer and trade,
For
freedom
yeah,
of religion.
better
Good,
for vegetation.
good,
More
good.
resources.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
We're in search of resources. So, what is going on in Europe is a couple of different things, right? The Black Plague or the Black Death, which we know is the bubonic plague, has been pretty much contained for a couple hundred years. So, like in the 1300s, the Black Death wipes out 2/3 of the population of Europe, right? And if you can imagine, now if right after the population right decreases by that amount, people get paid a lot more. Labor is in high demand, right? There are more jobs, there's more land available, etc. Well, by the 15th century, so we're talking about 1400s, 1490s in particular, that is abated, right? Population has caught up. So now you have this issue about there really isn't any more, quote, land available for purchase. It's all already owned. It's either owned by the crown, it's owned by these large wealthy families, or it's owned by the church. Okay, so there isn't a lot of ability to or upward social mobility available. And in the 1400s, land is wealth and wealth is mobility, right? Um, but we also have this very strict hierarchy of aristocrats, right? And they call them different things in, say, Spain and Europe, in England and France, but it's a very strict system of nobility. So you start with the crown, right? Crown is at the top, the monarchy, and then their relatives and people who have served them loyally in war, etc., are dukedoms, right? They become dukes and duchesses, and then things trickle down from there. But this idea of getting a title, right? You could be a duke, a viscount, a marquis, an earl, all of these things. You have to get that title from the crown. You cannot work your way into the aristocracy. You're either born into it or you marry into it. So there's this block against upward social mobility in Europe. And they still kind of have that, right? If you look at it now, you can't buy a title. You can marry a duke or duchess. You can marry an earl, but you cannot purchase this. You cannot move into this. You either have to be born into it or you have to marry into it. So you have this very strict situation there. And what goes along with that is something called primogeniture, which is just a fancy name for the oldest son gets everything, right? And in the 1400s, you had lots of kids. You had lots of kids because infant mortality, meaning death rate amongst children, was very high. So you would have, it's not uncommon for you to have 9, 10 kids, okay? And so if you have that many, right, and they survive to adulthood, the oldest boy gets everything. Ladies, if you were alive in that time period, you were married off to the richest man that came calling, basically. Women, even in upper class and royalty, were seen as pawns to make alliances for more money and protection. So women did not have choice back then about who they married. And to a certain extent, if you were upper class, neither did the men. Those marriages were arranged. But let's say you're the third or fourth son, you get nothing. Okay, so if you're born into a wealthy family or an aristocratic family, you will be well educated, probably multilingual. Definitely, if you're a man, you've been in the military, you've done some service in the military. So you have, the upbringing that sets you up for that, and you are considered part of the nobility. But as a second or third son, you don't get any estate or title. The title and all the money and all the land goes to the oldest brother. So you have all this. Yes, question. Asada? Question. You want to type it in, or are you trying to? Dawkins? Yes? Question? Oh, she's reconnecting. We lost her for a minute. All right, so when she gets back in, we'll get to her question. So for a lot of these young gentlemen, there isn't a whole lot there for them in Europe. In addition, you have the control of trade in the Mediterranean by the Muslim Empire, the Ottomans. Okay, and give me a minute, and I'm going to share this map with you so I can show you what we're talking about here. Okay, is that? I can't see that. Let me share it. Let's see. All right, I don't know that I can do this. Yes, Ms. Dawkins is back, or Asada is back. What can I do for you, ma'am? Sir. Ma'am, or sir. I think she got unconnected again. Okay, so let me try, and I'll pull up a map here so I can show it to you. I'll have to do it on the all right. Now let me share it. Really? This is all we got? Okay. Okay. All right. So, right, this is the Mediterranean Sea. And the Ottomans, or what would become the Ottomans later, is they control all of this area here, right? They control the Holy Land, they control North Africa, they even control southern part of Spain, which will actually end in 1492, but they control all the trade routes throughout the Mediterranean. They also control the overland route. They control the Silk Road. So if you want to trade with the East, with Asia at all, you have to go through the Muslim Empire. Okay, and to begin with, that doesn't seem like a problem, right? But every time you go through an exchange, right, you have to pay taxes. So your goods that you're getting are priced more than they paid for them, right? Because they're trying to make a profit too. In addition to that, you have the time that it takes, and specifically the Spanish, who are very, very Catholic. The monarch is very Catholic at this time. Doesn't want to deal with the Islamic Empire at all. So this is a push factor. All of these are push factors, right? So what pulls them across the ocean is this idea that they could reach the East by going west. Okay, they realized that the world was round, right? Everybody had accepted that by the 1490s, and even Christopher Columbus, right? And he had calculations, and he said, I think you can sail west across the ocean, and you will come into contact with India or the Asian countries, and then we can trade with them directly. So it's going to be quicker, it's going to be cheaper, and we don't have to go through the Islamic Empire and pay taxes that enrich them. The other thing that's got the Catholic monarchs all in a flutter is the fact that the Islamic Empire runs the Holy Land at this time. And so they, as well as the Pope that resides in Italy, it's not Italy yet, but it will become Italy, is also upset about that. So you have several issues that they have based on religion about not wanting to trade with them. So you have a lot of cartographers, a lot of explorers that are kind of researching this idea about going west, and they do believe that it's possible, right? Because they have no idea there's a huge American continent in the way. But they believe that Christopher Columbus's calculations are wrong. Christopher Columbus actually goes to several different monarchs in Europe trying to get sponsorship to go west. Okay, and what he proposes is you outfit me with 3 ships, we go west, we claim that land for you, or we set up trading posts. But either way, you're going to get taxes, you're going to get trading goods, you're going to get resources, and you're going to be the first to do it. And so, again, everyone thought that he had the right idea. They just thought that his math was wrong. And it was. But they thought that they knew that the world was much larger than he had anticipated. They knew it was going to take a lot longer than he was saying it would. So he gets turned down. And he even gets turned down by the Spanish a couple times. But he's persistent, right? And he comes across, or it's actually in 1492 when you see Isabella and Ferdinand. These are the monarchs of Spain. What they do is they complete their conquest of Spain. Now these two are married. They get married. She is the queen of Castile in her own right. He is the king of Aragon in his own right. They get married and they create the power couple of the 1400s. And they are a warrior couple, right? She has a full set of armor made out for her. I mean, she goes with him to war. They're very well suited. And together, they combine all of the provinces of Spain under one country. Sorry, excuse me. They combine all the provinces under one empire, the Spanish Empire. Again, she is very devout. They call her the most Catholic. She gets an official title from the Pope. And so they are instituting a state religion of Catholicism. And they finish conquering all of Spain in 1492. They officially eradicate the Moors and the Jews. Yeah, so in the southern part of Spain, in what is known as Andalusia, used to be controlled by the Islamic Empire, and they have gone to war with them, and they've either killed them or forced them to leave. There was a very thriving multicultural situation going on there. They allowed the Jews, they allowed them to stay if they would convert to Catholicism. Everybody else had to leave. But even though they allowed them to convert, they then began the Spanish Inquisition, which is basically church-sanctioned torture. And every family that quote-unquote converted would be interrogated. They were suspected of still practicing Judaism or Islam outside, inside their home behind closed doors. So it was not a good situation. But they finished this in 1492. So they're done with this. They have this empire, but it's new. And they are trying to make a name for themselves. So they finally allow Christopher Columbus. They give him the go-ahead. And they give him some money and they give him some ships. But they're hedging their bets. These ships are not great. Only one of them is really seaworthy, right? And so basically they give him this small amount, this small grant, and they're like, go see what you can find. And in their mind, or in their, they even record this in their writings, if he never comes back, they're only out a little bit of money. Because they fully said it. They fully thought it was like a 50-50 chance, right? He could go out there and never come back, or he could make it. And so he is, of course, sent off with these 3 ships. Like I said, only one of them is really seaworthy. He sails west. He has to lie about how far he's gone because he may be facing a mutiny, right? And eventually he lands in what was then known as Hispaniola, but it's the West Indies. And the reason they're called the West Indies is because he thought he was in India. So, for being a very famous explorer, he wasn't all that good at it, let's be honest. Right? And he contended until his death that he had reached India, even though everyone else was like, I think you got something else here, right? And so he begins the interaction between Europeans and Native Americans at the time. And so one thing we have to remember is that Native Americans were already established, already had civilizations. They were already at war with each other. Certain tribes, hated other tribes. So when the Spanish enter into this, there are some Native American tribes that welcome them, not because they think they're, good people. Let's be honest, because they recognize that the Spanish have horses and steel and weapons, firearms that could be useful in their own methods of warfare. Right? So if you're the only Native American tribe to be allied with these Europeans, that gives you an edge over your enemies on the continent. So that's the main reason, right? That's one of the reasons why they trade with the Europeans. And as soon as Columbus goes back, you start to see waves and waves of Europeans coming across. Columbus, did the Franciscans also try to impose religion on the Indians as well as? Yes, absolutely. Because conquistador is just a military man, right? He's military and he's there just for land, territory, wealth, etc., right? But he brings along the Franciscans, who are monks. They're a specific kind of monk, by the way. And they are there to convert, right? So once Columbus makes it back and they realize that they have this new kind of colony, the Spanish start to send lots of people over. And so when specifically with the Spanish, they're interested in gold, but they say that there's really three main reasons for Spanish colonization, and that's gold, glory, and God, right? The three G's. So how do we know there's gold? We see Native Americans walking around with gold on. And so this, of course, spikes something in the Europeans' mind that, hey, there's riches here to be found. So as soon as Columbus makes it back, again, like I said, his ships were not good, right? The three of them make it to the Caribbean. One of them is totally trashed. It's not seaworthy anymore. The other one is so bad, it's cut up for parts, it's chopped up for parts, and used to make the third ship seaworthy so they can go back on the third ship. That's how little money he had in the beginning. And so they come back and they tell the Spanish, look, this is what we found. And so the Spanish start sending people over. Conquistadors are a little bit later. A conquistador, again, is a very specific title. And it's usually, like we said, a second or third son. They've had military training. They're of nobility. And they come to the colonies, or what will be the colonies. They come to the Americas in search of gold and riches, right? And to make a name for themselves and fortune. Because, again, back home, they got nothing. So if they come over here and they can become, say, a governor of New Spain or a viceroyalty or something like that, then they can make a name for themselves. They'll get titles of their own that they can pass on to their children. And they can have large landed estates because there's land here that is not available in Europe. So there were a lot of incentives for them to come. But on that account, they have everything they know and move to a new land. And there's no guarantee that the natives won't kill them, right? Because that happens too. And so there are risk factors in all of that. What this turns into, this going back and forth across the Atlantic, is what we call the Columbian Exchange. Okay? And there's a graphic of it in your book. And hey, see, I think it's graphic 1.6, but I will pull it up and see if we can't show it to you. So, go. Okay. And so you start to see trade back and forth, and we see the Columbian Exchange kind of begin. So here's the graphic here. Let's see if we can get it bigger. Yeah. Not really. It's about the same size. Bigger there, I think. So you can see that you have people and goods. Okay. All right. Here we go. We have goods coming from Europe over here, sugar, and things of that nature. This isn't a very good one. Let's see if there's another one. I don't know. I have a better one I'll show you next time, because that one doesn't talk about everything. So what goes to the Americas is various types of livestock, right? Horses in particular, which most people, when they think of Native Americans, they picture them on horses, right? They didn't have horses till the Spanish got there. Horses are not native to the Americas. So the Spanish brought horses, pigs were not native, and pigs will come up again later. So they brought lots of livestock, longhorns, right, which are a very Texan thing. Those are from Spanish. Those are from the Spanish. Those are from Spain. Different types of cattle, etc. That are a staple of the Americas come across, as well as people. And people bring diseases, right? Now, what goes back is other goods like corn, potatoes, tobacco, beans, chocolate. It becomes chocolate, and things of that nature, and sugar, of course. And we'll talk about sugar and the trade dealing with the continent of Africa, of course, the slave trade, and how sugar kind of runs the world at this time. But we'll talk about that on Wednesday. So the Europeans bring these diseases with them, not only as asymptomatic carriers, which hopefully we all know what that means now. Thank you, COVID. But they begin what they call virgin soil epidemics, which is exactly what's happening right now with COVID. COVID caught us, and COVID is a virgin soil epidemic. There is no immunity to COVID, right? We don't have a vaccine. They're working on it, but that's the kind of spread we're looking at. And so, similar to the Black Death, you have people that come and they have immunity to smallpox, but they're asymptomatic carriers. The biggest thing that Europeans bring across are those diseases, right? And you do see malaria in the tropics. So when we look at what single factor helped in the colonization of the Americas and basically the decimation of the native populations, it's disease. And by the time we get to the Aztecs, and by the time Cortez is ready to fight them, they are at probably a third of their strength, and they've been beaten down by famine and disease already. So, that's not exactly a fair fight, if you will. So disease played a huge part in the contact there, as well as in Africa. Now, what did the colonies send back? They sent back syphilis. So there's always that. And again, syphilis is not something you can get rid of. So I actually think that's kind of karma, right? Because they wouldn't get syphilis unless they raped or slept with Native American women who had it, and you can't get rid of it. But then again, it didn't kill people in the massive amounts that smallpox did, right? And so then, like we said, you get the monks, and you get a lot of church friars and Jesuits, and although the Jesuits were pretty busy with the Spanish Inquisition, but Franciscan monks definitely came across. So I think we'll stop there, because that pretty much covers chapter 1 and parts of chapter 2, and we'll get into kind of the slave trade, right, obviously, and West African societies that are in chapter 2, and hopefully into Jamestown on Wednesday and Friday. So I will keep you up to date on the hurricanes. If you could please put your name in the chat. Again, we'll use that to go to check against the attendance report, because we know that's not always accurate. I'm going to go ahead and turn off